Mr. Waxman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sandal and Mr. Hicks, would like to thank you for appearing before us. Mr. Hicks, our armed services sit at an interesting nexus in our energy policy. They're both the biggest single user of energy and also reliant on the civilian energy infrastructure. Because of these two factors, they can be a significant catalyst for helping the nation transition to a clean energy future by advancing new technology and leading the way for the development of new commercial transportation fuels. In 2007, we enacted the Energy Independence and Security Act. Section 526 of that act contained a provision to ensure that long-term government contracts are not used to prop up dirty, unsustainable fuels. Mr. Hicks, from the Navy's perspective, what signal has Section 526 sent to industry and the armed services? And can you explain what the result has been?
I can explain that from the Department of Navy's perspective, again, not speaking for Department of Defense or the administration, but what we've seen is in working with, again, industry, from the refiners and the companies themselves to the equity communities that support them, is that they're responding to that, and they're holding themselves to that higher standard, not only on greenhouse gas emissions as 526 requires, so we see that as an effective policy tool, but also on things such as food security, water use, land use, indirect and direct, and they're holding themselves to that higher bar because, well, I'll leave it to them to describe why, but that's what we're seeing as a trend.
Well, you mentioned the algae-driven jet fuel the Navy purchased from Solazyme. I had the opportunity to visit their operation in Northern California. It's the world's first 100% algae-based jet fuel. And you have mentioned there are other things along those same lines. This seems to be the right result from the market signal that has been sent by Section 526. Is that right?
Yeah, it does, and I think, as you mentioned, Solazyme is a great example as a company that literally started in a garage, as I understand it, and has, as of a week ago, just went public and was oversubscribed by 10 or 12-fold. So, and hundreds of jobs coming along with that. But bottom line, providing fuel for us in the areas where we've used it for the testing and certification, blended with traditional fuels, and again, transparent to the users. It's been an effective tool. The market is responding to this and is ramping up to support it. And I would also say that private equity, in our conversation, multiple conversations with them, is lining up as well. And they're starting to see these companies with some very solid business plans and business models, and supporting them as well.
The bill that's before us for discussion would repeal Section 526. From the Navy's perspective, from your perspective, would repealing Section 526 send the right signal to industry and the armed services?
I think, again, we're comfortable with 526. It's an effective policy tool. It's having an effect on the market that I think is one that is the right direction, in the sense that it's providing not only clean fuels, but fuels that ultimately will be competitive. And I think that's what we're looking for.
It in effect means the armed services and the Congress are consistent in the message that we must pursue new, more sustainable fuels. I think that's an important policy that we want to continue. Mr. Sandal, the bill before us purports to be a roadmap to our energy future, but it omits key policies that many recognize are critically important. For example, it does not even mention energy efficiency. The legislation also fails to mention technologies that show so much promise and are just now beginning to be commercialized, like electric vehicles. Instead, it seems to be a proposal to return to the energy policies of the Bush administration, with a focus on drilling in the Arctic refuge and the outer continental shelf. Mr. Sandal, can you discuss whether this legislation identifies the right areas for us to focus on as a roadmap to our energy future?
Well, thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Let me just emphasize, in response to the point you made about energy efficiency, I talked to a power plant executive recently who told me that the cheapest power plant for him is the one that he doesn't have to build. And he underscored the tremendous potential in this country to improve our economic performance by saving energy, by stopping the wasting of energy. So any comprehensive energy plan for our country needs to include energy efficiency, which some people call the first fuel. It also needs to emphasize innovating, and we are an extraordinary nation. Through our history, we have innovated and succeeded by doing so. The energy race in the next century is going to be absolutely central, and I think government and business working together can help position the United States in this global competitive marketplace.
If this committee were to craft an energy policy to meet our nation's needs now and in the future, would the department be willing to work with us and support those efforts?
Yes, Mr. Ranking Member, very closely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.